Hey, welcome to Good Thinking Live. I am very, very glad you're here because we're going to do something interesting and fun again this week where we focus this show, as many of you know, and some of you are new, so maybe this is news to you, on giving ourselves a little bit of time, kind of affording ourselves a little bit of an opportunity to set aside all the time that we spend on what to think, do this like this, think like this, and just devote a wee bit more time to improving how we think. And you think about all the time you spend on your body exercising and trying to eat right, or admonishing yourself when we don't eat right. And how much time do we actually spend on our mental hygiene? Now, of course, meditation and mindfulness, some incredibly powerful and important, and I think everyone should learn, tools for mental hygiene. And then there's good thinking. And good thinking is not our natural default way of thinking because we're humans. And also, it's not necessarily our favorite way of thinking. But the key is to understand when we're thinking using good thinking and when we're thinking using other kinds of thinking, which doesn't mean that it's all bad thinking. And so this is a show about good thinking. And today we're going to talk about something that every single human succumbs to, like every single human. It's a fallacy, so it's a error in our logic and judgment. And also there are absolutely specific ways that we can overcome falling into the trap of this particular fallacy. And this fallacy is called the planning fallacy. And it is one of the things that prevents us from having our visions, our projects, our ideas become reality. All right, so that's what we're doing today. Let me know who's here. Let me know where you're from. We are live streaming on 3 platforms. One is kind of still an experimental platform, which is the Facebook Live, but this is a LinkedIn Live show. And also we are streaming on YouTube Live. So if you want to LinkedIn Live doesn't give notifications ahead of time. So if you want to get notifications about when we're going live, the show is Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific time or 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, then you can subscribe on YouTube. Just go to Becky Saltzman, smash that bell, and you'll get notifications for the show. So if you're watching live, let us know where you are from and who is here. I see Jennifer Felberg, my partner in crime at Applied Curiosity Lab, here from Multnomah Village in Portland, Oregon. So let me know who is here. Stephen is here from Stumptown. And the great thing is now I can actually see the comments. Hopefully they're all going to feed in from LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, but you will only maybe see the comments from the platform that you're watching. So we've got Chi from Boise, Idaho. We've got Anais. Am I pronouncing it right? Anais from Coachella. I love when people are saying like the specifics of where they're from. Anyway, we're going to get started. For those of you who are here right now, I want to give you a little hint that if you put bonus in the comments, then I will personally send you a bonus tip that will help you overcome planning fallacy in a way that is so easy, but also not intuitive. Michael Allen Harrison from Beaverton, Ahmed from Egypt, Sony, I just looked, Sunny from Hungary. We've got people from all over. We've got Martha from London. Fantastic. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to give out some, what do you call it? The rubber chickens today. So for participation. All right. How many of you have an idea, a project, something that bonus? Stacy's the first one. She gets the bonus. I'll be sending that to you afterwards. Martha, bonus. Yay, yay, yay. Okay. You're going to get them. How many of you have a project or idea, something that you want to see happen? Anyway, so we got to think very specifically in your mind. Actually, think of a project that you think, man, I probably could get that done in a month. Like, so if you're going to write a book, could you get a book done in a month? Could you plant a garden in a month? Could you start a podcast in a month? Could you start a company in a month? Could you launch an app in a month? Think of something. Maybe it's like I can clean my house in a month. That's about all I can do. Think about something that you could do in about a month. And we've got Ahmed from Egypt. We've got some bonus people. This is going to be great. All right. So you have something in your mind. So let's say that you have a, maybe you're going to write a thesis. Your thesis is due in a month. But papers like this or projects like this, you think, this should probably take about 2 weeks. So I'll give myself an extra week. And this is kind of a hint that you might be succumbing to a very, 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 very devious and pesky and pervasive fallacy called the planning fallacy. It is the fallacy that makes us think that projects that we are embarking in, whether it's in a business with a bunch of people or in our own lives, our own individual projects, are going to take, we project that they're going to take a lot less time than they actually do. Turns out that there's additional things to this planning fallacy that was originally highlighted by the famous behavioralist Kahneman and Tversky, but they also found that projects tend to cost more, and also people tend to underestimate risk. So they underestimate cost, they underestimate time. I shouldn't say they, we underestimate risk. The Sydney Opera House, that was due to be completed in 1963. Guess when it was completed? And I'm talking about a majorly scaled down version of it. Any guesses? Any guesses? All right. Any guesses? 1973. The original budget was $7 million. The ultimate budget was what it actually cost was $120 million. Now, this was 1973. So it took 10 years longer. What is that? 15 times as long as as much rather as they thought it was going to cost. And these are people that are novices. These are people who had built stuff in the past, big projects in the past. So we see this even in experts. So it doesn't really matter, like, have you done something like this before? You're still going to succumb to the planning fallacy unless you take from these tips and tricks that have been revealed in behavioral science. All right, so Michael Allen Harrison, actually going to have 2 albums and a TV special done by October 3rd. All right, so maybe you'll weigh in on whether some of these tricks and tips have helped you, or you didn't really need them and you were already on point for October 3rd. Jennifer said 1982 for the Sydney Opera House, not far off. All right. First, I'm going to get, there's another little study that may be more related, especially if any of you are in college, or you're going to be in college, or you were in college. How many psychology majors? How many people studied psychology at some point? Let me know in the comments, because this will probably ring true. So these are psychology majors. This study was done with in 1990, I think, like 4. And there was a study done with psychology majors, and these were seniors. They weren't freshmen. So these were just like the senior people that were doing the Sydney Opera House. And they were asked to project how long it would take to complete their thesis. So these are people who've been in college for, 3.5 years, whatever. They're working on a thesis. This is their area of study. Presumably, they would have known a little bit about this planning fallacy. And they projected that it would take about 34 days to complete their thesis. And, you hear these numbers and you think it's not the same as 10 years with the Sydney Opera House, but you're not dealing with that many numbers. So then the researchers said, okay, imagine that everything went right. How many days would it take? And they changed their prediction to about 27 days on average. And then the researchers said, imagine everything that could go wrong. And they increased the number of days that it could potentially take to about 48, 49 days. But on average, it took 55 days. So 70% of the people, and these are people who had studied this, people who had been in college, they knew how long papers took, 70% underestimated how much time their thesis would take. And this doesn't even count the number of people that never finished their thesis. So that is just showing from whether you're a big kind of builder or a student, it doesn't really matter how experienced we are. We all succumb to the planning fallacy. So we've got some psychology majors. We've got Chi, psychology minor, Stephen, psychology and business major. All of us back in the day studied. Now, one of the things that a lot of people might think is, should you ask other people? Should you just ask other people, what do you think of my plan? So, Michael Allen Harrison's going to get this project out by October 3rd. He probably has done a lot of projects like this. Maybe he would ask a couple of people, hey, what do you think of my plan? Should he do this? Well, it turns out that asking other people tend to be pessimistic about our plans in kind of the reverse way. So that isn't necessarily one of the best ways to overcome this planning fallacy. Now, in the business world, it was found that 80% of startup ventures fail to achieve their initial market share targets. In classrooms, students report finishing about 2/3 of their assignments later than they predicted. So it doesn't matter, again, whether you're talking about a business project or you're talking about a school project, it really is a universal problem. All right, why do we do this? Well, there's a couple of interesting reasons. Any guesses? What do you think? Anyone want to guess? Well, sometimes it's because we succumb to, these are some kind of general things, and then you can throw in some biases. Sometimes we think that we're better than other people. I mean, the Dunning-Kruger kind of superiority bias is strong. There was a study that found that asked incoming university students to estimate how they would perform academically compared to their classmates. And on average, the participants believed that they would perform 84% better than their peers. Well, I mean, it could be accurate for individual students, but it would be very much impossible for everyone to be in the top 16%. So one of the things is, we think that we're better than average. And maybe some of us are, but average is there for a reason. So some of us aren't. And that comes to the number one reason, kind of the first reason is we're overly optimistic when we consider how long things will take. We fail to consider external factors like a pandemic, like getting sick, like someone that you're relying on getting sick. And we fail to embrace how unpredictable the future is. All right. So when you think about a project that you were late on, what is the first reason that comes to mind? Is it something external, like something that I never anticipated happening, or something internal, like I just couldn't get motivated, or I just had too many other things to do, or there were too many really good shows to stream on Netflix? That's one of mine. Anyway, put in the comments, what are some of the things when you think of being overly optimistic? Why were you overly optimistic? What was it? Was it internal to you? Or was it external to something that, was beyond our ability to predict, like a lot of the future, like this pandemic and all of the ramifications of what we've experienced and also what we might experience? All right. And then also, success is easier to imagine than failure. And even though, we know we need to have a positive, outlook, and that's all very, very true, although you'll see in the bonus, it can be counterintuitive for those of you who put bonus in the comments. It's easier to imagine success. So when we have a project, we know kind of the steps that we need to get to that project, but we don't imagine all the many, many, many ways that could get in the way, that could, and I don't mean failure, but could poke holes in our project. And then the biggie. This is a really biggie. I think this is the biggest one. There are some behavioral scientists that would argue with me, but I think this is the biggest one, is we fail to consider data from similar projects. Now, we don't necessarily fail to consider data from our own projects, but we'll say, that was different because at that time I had 3 kids at home and I really couldn't get that book done. Or that was different. My boss was a jerk and he or she didn't know what they were doing. Or that was when I wasn't really feeling that well. So it's not that we don't look at our own projects, but we fail to look at other people's similar projects. Why? Because we think we're unique. And instead of looking for a reference project, which is a hint at one of the ways to overcome this bias, we think our situation is unique. So now I'm going to go back and say, Jennifer says people disagreeing on the plan. That is super interesting. I'm going to touch on that in just a second. And we have Anais saying, too many commitments, I overbook myself. Oh, me too. We're so bad. Why do we do that? Well, we're going to talk about that and ways to overcome it. So fantastic. And Stacy says, underestimate the amount of work to be done and the time it takes, plus the time for things to, macerate. Yeah, absolutely. And this is where we're going to get into the outside view versus the inside view. And the first trick, well, I think it's the second tip that you can use to overcome the planning fallacy. All right. All right. So we fail to consider things from similar situations because we think that situations are unique. And a lot of people say, just ignore the competition and forge ahead. Well, it turns out that feels good because we think this is different. We're not paying attention. We don't care what other people think. We don't care what our adversaries or people who poke holes at us. They're just pessimists. There is a big difference between finding a reference case for your project, okay, and succumbing to all of the negative feedback that people, especially online, want to share with you unsolicited, okay? There's a big difference. So this idea of we just need to ignore what everyone else says and we can ignore what everyone else does is, you can do that to a certain extent to buffer your own kind of self-esteem and buffer your own mental hygiene, but you can't ignore reference cases. And that is how you can begin to overcome the planning fallacy. Now, first trick, ready for the first trick? The first trick is to separate the project from the plan. And this is so you overcome a very common fallacy called the ad hominem. I'm going to give an example. So let's say that there's someone that you really don't like and they have a good idea. And it's very difficult because when there are people we don't like, it's very hard to separate the people from the idea. Or you have people that you like or a group of people that you like, and you have a hard time separating the people from the idea. So the idea with this is to separate the project from the plan so you don't have to beat yourself up over the project. Like your idea, you can keep that sacred. Like I'm going to write a book or whatever. But now you're going to leave that there. People can say, you're an idiot. You can't write a book. That's fine. Leave that there. You can ignore that. But what you can't ignore is the plan. And that's when you start interrogating the plan. So separating the project from the plan. Most people are pessimistic for sure. I've learned to filter and listen for something helpful in the moment, focus on the content of the project and trust the process, listen to everything, grab the gems and move forward. I think there are some really good gems in Michael Allen Harrison's comment there. And also there might be some things that you can even take and tweak a little bit to make your process even better. All right. So once you've separated the process from the plan, what do? The next thing is to find a base case or reference. So if you're going to write a book and you think your book is unique, which it is because you're writing it, you don't look for all the things that make your book and your project unique. If you're going to plant a garden, if you're going to launch an app, if you're going to start a company, whatever you're going to do, the idea isn't to look for all the reasons to justify why your situation is unique. I'm smarter, I'm better, I've learned from my mistakes. Sure. Yeah, sure. The point with finding your reference is to find the similarities. So I used to be in real estate. So we would find reference case properties so that you could then do an analysis of other properties. And invariably, myself included, people thought, oh, our house is unique. You don't understand. Well, sure. Yeah, your house is unique. Most people haven't slept in your house. So there are a lot of things. Maybe you painted a certain color. Maybe you brought in some kind of specific tile from some exotic place. But the idea isn't to start with what makes it unique. The idea is to find commonalities. So maybe you say, I'm going to start with the square footage. I'm going to take all houses, or it could be commercial, which is where I started, all houses that have 3,000 square feet. And then you adjust. Well, this is on 20 acres. That's going to be very different than a house with 3,000 square feet on a 50 by 100 foot lot, for example. So this is how you do. So you look for a base, a common, and you stop getting precious about this is unique. This team is different. We have new knowledge, and you start with the base. All right. So think about your project. Has anyone done anything, planting a garden, writing a book, launching an app, that is similar to yours? Now, if you've done it more than them, you still want to find what I call the outside view, because most of us, and this is getting into what you do with the reference case, most of us take the inside view. We look at all the factors. Maybe you are on a team and you need to have like all of these people pull in to work on your team. And you go, hey, engineers, how long will it take you to do your part? And you break the project into segments and you take all these different pieces and then you put it together and you project out. That's using the inside view. You gather all your data about your situation and you project out with a date, with a price, a cost, with the risks. The outside view is when you start with your reference case. And then you start saying, yeah, but our team has 20 years more experience than this reference case. Okay, so that might will it shave 5 years off the project? No, 5 months. Then you start creating a plan. Now, it's hard because, when you're telling people that you're going to do something, and let's say you go to your boss and someone says, oh, I can do this engineering thing in 6 months, and someone else says, oh my goodness, I'm going to need a year and a half. Take the vaccinations. Do you really think a company is going to have an incentive to tell, a government or tell investors that this vaccination is going to take 18 months when its competitors are saying, no, we can get one out in 5? No, that's why you end up with a Sydney Opera House. But it's okay, but there is a time when we're fooling ourselves. And again, it's important, if you really want to get closer to the truth, use good thinking, that you have to be aware of when you're kind of taking these shortcuts. All right. Next question. How many think that adding more people to a project, I'm not talking about random people, I'm talking about qualified good people. So you want to write a book. So you bring in an editor early on, you add another editor for copywriting, maybe you add a couple of other readers, then how many think that adding more people to a project can have a positive effect on how fast or how accurate you are on the timing and the risks? And how many think, Jennifer says, it can slow things down? Absolutely. But can it speed things up? And the reason I say that is because there's a kind of a famous book called The Mythical Man Month, and that was written by Fred Brooks. So this is a concept that people call the Brooks effect, where bringing more people onto a team can end up causing a bigger planning fallacy effect, but not always. So got to be careful about your always and your nevers, but yeah, of course it can slow things down. All right, so we've got, you separate the project from the idea, or the project from the plan rather, then you find your reference case, you take the outside view, you calculate. What else? What else? Well, next thing you can do is set implementation intentions. And this is where you get to be really specific about where you're going and what you're doing and when. There was an interesting study in the Netherlands, and I'm going to ask you what you think about this before I give you the results. Yes, and Jennifer says, yes, that could help sometimes if planned well, bringing more people. And Annie says more people can lead to more disagreements. Absolutely. And this kind of gets into a whole realm of diversity of thought, where you want to bring people into a project, where it can be a bottleneck, but also where it can end up with a much more beautiful and effective project outcome. So all of this is going to be part of good thinking. Today's the planning fallacy, so you're stuck with this. Stephen says it can speed things up if the number of total people doesn't exceed the granularity of the work breakdown. Ooh, good, excellent. That leads us to, well, that's actually number 5. So you're skipping ahead. You get an A. All right. Study in the Netherlands, participants were given a writing assignment and told to complete it within a week. The participants were split into 2 groups. Both groups were instructed to set their goal intentions, meaning, they wanted to indicate, what they needed to say. What day are you going to start to write the paper? And what day do you believe that you would finish? So that's intention. And that's good. We kind of do that with every plan. No, we don't. Sometimes we just go, God, I'd really like to write a book someday. So, the first step with setting implementation intentions is to say, okay, I'm going to start it not next month, not next week, not tomorrow, but tomorrow, not tomorrow at 4, but tomorrow at 4:32. So the more specific the intention, the better. And then you say, well, I'm going to finish it in a month. Then you have to go back and say, okay, really, how realistic is that? All right, well, I have nothing else to do. I'm going to sit in quarantine. Yeah, that's probably not a good enough reason. So take the outside, create your reference, create the outside view, and calculate. Now, if you think to yourself, this is a pain in the butt, I don't want to do this, that's fine. Because we don't always have to use good thinking. The key is to know when we're using good thinking and when we're not, and not to fool ourselves. And that's fine. We're not rational creatures. The key is to know when we are using rational thinking and when we're not, and not to beat ourselves up when we're not, but to say, I'm not. Planning is a time when you want to use rational thinking if you want your plan to become, if you want your project to become a reality. All right, so these two groups, we've got, they said the time of day, that the day that they're going to spend, not the time of day, the day they're going to start writing the paper, and the day that they think they're going to end. All right, but the two groups, the second group, that was group A and group B. The second group had a different set of implementation instructions. All right, how many know what helped the second group get closer to their plan? How many know what helped the second group overcome the planning fallacy? Anyone? All right, I'm going to give you a hint. Ready for a hint? Then you can say what gave the second group. When you are thinking about voting, if you're in the US, you have a big upcoming election. When you ask people, when are you going to vote? You'll get, kind of the planning fallacy. When you ask people, how specifically are you going to get the ballot to the box? With all the specifics, you end up getting closer to understanding who will actually vote and who won't. So that's your little hint. Back to this Netherlands study. What did they say to the second group? Or what are some things you could say to yourself? If you've got a project and you've already said, okay, I'm going to start on this date, it's going to be done by this date. What is something, understanding that whole voting scenario with the specificity involved, what are some things you could do to make sure that you were making that plan closer to reality? Anyone? Does anyone have any ideas? All right. Okay, this is what they did in the Netherlands. They said they asked the second group to do this implementation specificity. So this was the group was supposed to specify what time of day they would write, not just the day they would write. Kind of give you a little hint. The time of day they would write. They also asked where they would write. Where will you be sitting or standing when you write? What's the location? And then they asked the second group to visualize themselves following through on their plan, like visualize the steps. Now, this is probably difficult in a big project, but if you start with 100 people, 1,000 people in a company, but if you start with your base, your reference, and then you kind of chunk it, like Stephen hinted, we're going to get to on the last tip. And you ask each contributing person, each contributing team to go through this process. A group of engineers, ask each of them, what time of day will you start writing this code? Where will you be? Well, I'll be partly in my office, partly at a coffee shop. All right. Think about the process of going through and writing this code, or think about the process of writing this book, or think about the process of, creating this work of art, this music project. Visualize each step. Researchers found that setting these specific implementations intentions resulted in specifically more realistic goal setting. At the same time, it didn't lessen the participants' optimism. Like, it wasn't like they had to say, hey, listen, stop overcommitting and under-delivering. You're never going to get this done. You're never going to get this done. It really actually didn't have any effect on how excited they were about the project. They were even more confident in their ability to meet their goals. Not like, oh, you're making me face reality and this is making me less confident. Actually, the exact opposite. And they reported fewer interruptions while they were working. And it may be that the process of thinking through these specifics of completing a task resulted in a stronger commitment. And commitment is a huge part of whether we ever finish these projects or bring the ideas that we have out into the world. All right, the last one, because we're coming up on the 30 minutes. Where are we? What time? Are we good? SMART goals. Yes, SMART goals. Yes. Okay, Stacy, now I'm going to ask you, elaborate. elaborate in the comments. All right, the last tip, and there are several, except for the bonus, which you have to put bonus to get that. The last tip is to segment, to break up big projects into their component parts and then plan for the completion of the smaller subtasks. Some people call them task cards, creating task cards. So what you do is you go through the exact same process with smaller chunks of projects. So, you know, a very simple thing that I could draw on maybe is writing a book or launching a podcast. And you go to your base, your reference, you find out what are all the tasks involved, and then you do the same process with these tasks. It seems like a lot of, a lot of work. But like anything with good thinking, it becomes like riding a bike, or it becomes like driving a car. Because you, first you're like looking over your shoulder and you're aware of everything and you're checking all the boxes that you're doing things right, and invariably you're not. And then eventually you're just driving the car to the point where you might forget to put on the signal here and there. So this show, Good Thinking, is just a little bit of time to remind ourselves about that signal. Say, okay, I'm not going to turn on the signal, but being aware that you're not. And so this segmenting, or as Stacy says, specific, measurable, attainable, time-bound, SMART goals, thank you for revealing, is really how you then apply some of these, separating the project from the plan, finding your reference, outside view, and you can do that with these smaller task cards. And as bad as we are at estimating the amount of time for relatively large tasks, the smaller and smaller the tasks, we still succumb to the planning fallacy, but we are less likely to do that if we can apply these techniques. And it can just be a quick process, like, am I discounting other people who have done something similar because I think my project is not so unique? You're either unique, one of a kind, or you're not. There's no such thing as so unique. You're one of a kind or you're not. And we are all one of a kind. But the point is, that we look for the commonalities in these base or reference cases. Sometimes they're hard to find, so we have to adjust, because you might be a 3,000 square foot house on, 20 acres or a 50 by 100 foot lot. You might have, Bavarian tile brought in from, ancient artifacts and installed into your house. You might have tile from Home Depot. All of it's fine. You just need to know how to create and look at your base. And then you can calculate where things have value or where things might take longer. All right. So what about your plan to vote? You should know that a survey of Canadian taxpayers it was a survey in 1997, found that if they mailed their tax forms, found that they all mailed their tax forms in a week later than they predicted. They had no misconceptions about their past record of getting forms mailed in, but they expected that this time they would get it done quickly. And so reflecting back on past experiences or past things doesn't seem to be one of the tricks that helps us overcome the planning fallacy. Jennifer says Thompson tile. Oh my God, that is hilarious. Yes, Thompson tile. Go to YouTube and Google Jennifer Felberg Thompson tile, and you can see her YouTube videos on Thompson tile. Love them. Anyway, this idea of thinking about what we've done in the past and trying to apply it to making ourselves better planners in the future doesn't work. So if you're in the US and you plan to vote, how do you plan to get your ballot to the box? I mean, what day, what time? How are you going to get there? What stamp are you going to put on? Are you going to drop it off? Be specific. And also, don't be precious about the fact that this time I've learned from my mistakes, I'm going to do it better. Because when it comes to the planning fallacy, it's actually better maybe to learn from your reference cases mistakes. Those are some tips and tricks, and I hope you guys join every Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live. Should we do it on Facebook? Should we continue to do it on Facebook? I don't know. We'll see. It's kind of it's not like a personal show, so I'm wondering about Facebook, but we'll see. Thanks so much for participating. I'm so glad you guys are here. If you end up seeing this after the live show and you put your comments in and you share or subscribe, you'll still get the bonus, but you have to put bonus in. So if you didn't watch the whole thing or the beginning, you'll miss. Have a great week, and go ahead and start separating your projects from your plans. But while you're at it, separate people from the ideas so you can scrutinize ideas too. Anyway, have a great week.